Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be finishing up this redraw, so let's just go ahead and get started. Um, I'm going to be coloring the bubbles, the background, and adding the highlights today. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. Adding the highlights is one of my favorite parts of the art process. I think it really helps the eyes look less like lifeless little black holes. So yeah, look forward to that. Um, I'm once again using Copic markers and for the coloring, and later on when I get to those highlights, I'm gonna be using a fine tipped Posca paint pen. Um, I used to use white gel pen for highlights, but they weren't opaque enough for me, honestly. So I switched to acrylic paint, and that works better for me. Um, you can also go ahead and use gouache for highlights if you'd like. Um, but I don't own any gouache. I've never tried gouache, because the whole paint thing. Um, so I can't speak for how well gouache works. But if you're into gouache, you probably know that gouache is good for you. I'm not sure. Yeah. So to speak a little bit about the process of coloring in these bubbles, um, I'm not sure if it reads that she's like trying to blow the bubbles out of her hand. Now that I'm looking at this more closely, I think it just looks like she's just like, I don't know. You guys tell me if it looks like, if it reads that she's supposed to be blowing the bubbles. But yeah, but speaking about the bubbles, I approached them more for how I would color clouds than making them look like actual bubbles. Um, and this my process for drawing clouds. I don't focus on realism in my art. I'm more like a simplistic sort of style for representing things. And I think that the bubbles came out pretty good. At least I feel like they look like bubbles in a tub. But you can let me know if I'm being delusional. Yeah. But to create the look I was going for, I started by laying down my darkest shadows. Because I'm working dark to light today. I wanted the bubbles to look pretty blended out, and I had a good amount of transition shades, so working dark to light was helpful for that because it's good for blending, and since I had a lot of transition shades, it wasn't gonna end up looking splotchy. So after I laid down the initial shadows, I went in with my next lightest color, my mid-tone color, and blended it out, and then went in with my lightest color and blended that out. Um, the coloring process for markers just looks more complicated than it is because there's a lot of back and forth for blending. Since markers are a wet medium, the blending is gonna look better when you work wet on wet. And by that I mean there's dry mediums like colored pencils and graphite and stuff, and then there's wet media like watercolors and like alcohol markers. And so when you work wet on wet with alcohol markers, when you lay down one color, the ink is going to sit there for a minute, for however long it sits there, and you're going to want to go over it. If you want to blend it, which you might not, but if you want to blend it, you're going to have to you don't have to. Okay, I'm adding too many caveats. But if you want it to be blended better, a little bit more of a seamless blend, it's better to do it when it's wet, when the other marker is wet, okay? Um, because it will help the markers bleed into each other a little bit and cause more of a seamless blend, okay? Um, and the markers will stay wet longer depending on what kind of paper you use. Um, Like some papers will have the ink sit there for a long time, just sit on the paper, and you can even move it around with another marker. And then other papers, like watercolor paper, since watercolor paper is made to absorb a lot of water, it'll just suck up all the ink for your alcohol markers, and then it'll dry really fast. And the alcohol markers, since they're made of alcohol, they already dry really fast. So if you're coloring that with them, if you're trying to get a good blend, you have to move kind of fast. I don't know if you can tell that I'm moving fast in this. Um, you don't have to like rush, but you just kind of want to get it on there before the ink dries. Um, because you want that that blend. You might be thinking that you don't want your markers to bleed out all over to create a blend, and you're kind of right with that line of thinking. You might not want your markers to bleed outside of the lines that you spent hours inking. But you can use some bleeding to your advantage. Like a little bit of bleed is not that bad. Um, but that's another reason why you should test your materials before you use them, including the paper that you're going to use. It can be really frustrating when your art supplies don't act the way that you're expecting them to. And sometimes that stuff can really just ruin your whole piece. Um, so I'd say if you're not trying to embrace chaos with your work, try to plan out things as much as you can. Because, like I was talking about with the paper, some paper, especially alcohol, especially paper made for markers, it can bleed like crazy. And that was in that paper video I was going to make. That was going to be like an hour and a half long. Um, I'm not sure if you guys are super interested in paper, but I could talk about paper for a long time. Paper is like one of my interests. So I just recommend planning out your pieces as much as you can. I know when I go in all guns a blazing, I always end up fucking up the piece. So I try to plan as much as I can. Um, Also, as a quick side note, I've been told I might be speaking too quickly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and try and speak a little bit slower. Sorry if you've had some trouble following along or if you're hard of hearing and you have trouble hearing what I'm saying. I've been told since I was a kid that I talk too fast. Um, when I'm speaking, I don't feel like I'm talking very fast, but other people do. But I never really internalized it enough to change, I guess. But I think that like when I go on my tangents, um, I'm trying to speak quickly because I want to get out everything I need to say before I forget it. But I'm writing a script down now, so I shouldn't have to rush to get out what I want to say. Um, and you might be thinking, why would you forget what you're going to say before you say it? And it's just I have a lot of thoughts and they're fast. So um I tend to forget what I'm going to say. Getting back to the piece though, I'm going to start wrapping up the coloring of the bubbles now, and I'm gonna be moving on to something that I'm not entirely sold on. Since the bubbles were pink, I thought I should go ahead and add a bounce light coming off of them, which basically means that like the light is reflecting off the bubbles and it's going to be getting reflecting onto the subject. So it basically means I'm just gonna start adding pink into the shadows. Um, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because the bubbles are not emitting light, and also I don't know if bubbles really bounce light off of them like that. Like I'm not sure if they reflect light like that. But I thought it might look good and like cute stylistically just to have like a bounce light coming off of them. Um, so as you can see, I'm adding it to the face, and really, I really kind of just wanted it on the hands because the bubbles, the hands are like in the bubbles, so they were gonna be affected by their bounce light the most, and like the bottom of her chin, I guess, because also it's pretty close to the bubbles. Um, but then I was like, this doesn't look too bad, and then I went crazy and added it everywhere, to the hair, even to the background. Um, I'll let you guys be the judge of whether or not that looks good. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still not sure if this was a good decision or if I really just messed up the whole black and white vibe I was going for. But yeah, I was so torn on this that when I made another piece for this week, which you'll see later, I did the same thing and I'm pretty sure I ruined that one. Um, you'll see that more when I talk about it when I post the video, but um, yeah. So since I ruined the other one, I feel like this one is also ruined. I looked at the other one, I like this one. I'm like, they look kind of similar. Um, and so I'm not sure if I like this one anymore. But yeah, not to say that I feel like it looks bad all of a sudden. I just feel like when I get to the end of a drawing and it's coming along the way I planned it. I'm talking about a plan again, but it's coming along like the way I planned it. And then I guess maybe something in my soul craves spontaneity because I feel like always when I get to the end of a piece, I just start doing stuff out of nowhere and I'm not planning it. And I'm just like, well, this will probably look good. And instead of sitting down and testing it on like digital or whatever to see if I like it, I just go ahead and do it and I don't plan anything. And it's so frustrating when you know that you should be making a plan and you do make a plan and then you don't stick to it. It's like, what is wrong with me? Um, but I did, when I do this piece for this upcoming week, you'll see it probably like on Wednesday or something. But I spent like 20 minutes fussing with that one off screen because I didn't know what color I wanted to make the shirt. Like I was doing digital coloring to figure out what color I wanted the shirt for like 20 minutes. And then for this one, I just was like, what if I put pink everywhere? And I didn't even test it out. And now I don't know if I like it. It's like, follow your own advice, buddy. So, yeah, things would go better if I would just plan out things and test them digitally. I mean, like, what do I have digital art for if not to test out things before I ruin pieces? I mean, I use digital art for doing digital pieces, but if you do have the ability to use digital art and traditional art, and you can like have like a drawing program that you can use to like test out things, I would recommend doing that. I didn't do that for this one, obviously, um, but it's like a good thing to try if you're like, I'm not sure how this is gonna turn out, and you don't want to end up having to redraw something. I would just go ahead and do that. Okay, we have about another minute or two until we get to the highlights, but they go by pretty quickly, so I'm going to talk about them a little bit before you actually see me do them. Um, for me personally, I like to add highlights in the eyes, on the tip of the nose, and usually I like to do them on the cheeks. Um, but I don't think I did them for this piece because I had that little heart-shaped mole under her eye. Um, I did that for I don't think. Oh gosh, I can't remember now. Um, I didn't do them for the Inktober that I had when I'm redrawing for these, but I thought that I did, so I put it on there. And I put it on the next piece that I did for this too. So I didn't add the highlights to the cheeks. And I also struggled to add the highlights under the eyes. Um, when I was looking at a lot of art pieces for a while, I like the way that people would emphasize like the under eyelid, and so I like to put color under the eye to represent the other under eyelid, and I also like to add a highlight under the lower eyelid, um, which basically ends up covering all the marker coloring that I did underneath it. But it's okay. I don't mind. You can still see it a little bit. But I really like the way that adding highlights under the eye makes the eye pop, not just the eyeball, but the whole eye. Um, and that's part of finding your style is incorporating things that you see other people do and that you like. So I incorporated under adding that under eye highlight. I also added a little bit of highlight to the lip, which I forgot about because you can't really see it in the drawing right now because the what's it called, the lip is so light and the white pen is so light, but it's there. I'm not sure if I'm gonna post the finished drawing on my Instagram or what, but yeah, it's there. I also like to stylize the highlights a little bit. This is not anything like unique or groundbreaking, but I like to make them little hearts, just like the little mole on her face is a little heart. When I put the highlights in her eyes, they're gonna be hearts. And also the highlight on her nose is a heart. And typically when I do highlights on the cheeks, they're also little hearts. Um, I just think that they're cute. That's literally the only reason why I do it. I could have made them little stars if I wanted to. Um, but I think the hearts would be cuter. And also, I'm not really great at drawing stars. I wish that the hearts in her eyes were a little bit smaller. Um, because they're not really hearts. I mean, they are hearts. I mean, they're not really highlights. They're more of her pupil. Um, I colored in a little bit of the pupil. But I typically end up covering it with white because I prefer like a white pupil look. So I feel like they're a little bit too big for what I was going for. Um, so if I could just shrink those down a little bit, I feel like they would be perfect. But yeah, thank you for joining me for another video. Um, I hope I wasn't speaking too fast, and I hope that you learned something. I'm not really here to do like tutorials or anything, um, but I hope you can gain just a little bit of, I don't know, knowledge from hearing me just talk about my art process. I think you can learn something from anyone, so I hope that you learn something from me, even though sometimes I think I'm just a little bit of a fool. When it comes to this art stuff, I feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants most of the time. I hope it's not too noticeable. But when I talk about it, I think that it is like super noticeable. Um, but I hope you guys enjoyed spending this time with me. Hopefully I will see you tomorrow. I've been able to keep this up for a week, so or by for 2 weeks, so I think I got this. All right, bye bye. See you next time.